Welcome to Uncopyable Women in Sales. If you're looking for actionable insights and real-world tools to turbocharge your sales starting tomorrow, well, you're in the right place. Your host, Kay Miller, earned the affectionate nickname Muffler Mama when she sold more automotive mufflers than anyone else in the world. In this podcast, Kay will talk to another superstar woman in sales as they reveal uncopyable strategies you can use to rack up more leads, snag dream clients, and take your sales numbers through the roof. Stay tuned and get ready to make more sales and how about this? More money.
My guest today is Shama Hyder. Shama is the founder and CEO of Zen Media, one of the country's leading B2B marketing and PR companies. Shama is an acclaimed keynote speaker and has delivered keynotes in over 24 countries. She's the author of 2 best-selling books, including The Zen of Social Media Marketing, now in its 4th printing. She has won numerous awards and has been called Millennial Master of the Universe by Fast Company. Shama, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Kay. Great subject and a fun audience. So
yes, and they are really going to learn and be inspired by you. So I'm honored that you're on. I met you, of course, through my husband, Steve. You had a mutual client, which is MHI, Material Handling, and he immediately thought you were awesome, which as soon as I got to learn more about you, I totally understood. I agree. And so I would like to start with talking about this company that you founded when you were, 21? Zen Media. Why don't you tell us about your company and what it does, what you do?
yes, and Steve's just one of those wonderful people who loves to make connections, and he's a rare breed, and I love people like that. So I'm so glad he connected us. I'm thrilled to be here. So yes, started the company when I was, maybe 21, 22 years old, and it is called Zen Media. I started it right out of grad school, so I have never had a regular job. I don't know what that's like. I like to joke that I'm unemployable, so hence the self-employed. I had this notion in my head that social media was going to be a big thing, and this is before social media was a big thing. And I did my thesis on it on Twitter specifically when it had 2,000 users because I was just fascinated by the space. And I was getting my master's at the University of Texas at Austin in organizational communication and technology. And I had an amazing grad advisor, Dr. Donna Ballard, who was very encouraging of my my fancies because at that time, that's how people saw it. Thought social media is a fad. I don't really know where there were people who were still thinking the internet. We don't really know where this internet thing is going. And so, you add social media to the mix and it's just a different beast. And for multiple reasons, and I'm happy to double click on any of them, I put out my own shingle and started Zen Media, which originally was one of the first social media marketing agencies in the world, arguably, because it's so new. And then from that, we've evolved, obviously, to what we are today. And we found our kind of special niche in helping complex industries with discerning audiences. So that's generally the clients that work with us are in complex industries, tech, healthcare, manufacturing, B2B, some B2C, but on the B2C side, even it's more sophisticated B2C. So not necessarily lifestyle, but yeah, it's when, clients want to break through the noise and they've got a message and they need to make sure that they're getting in front of their audiences. So that's what we do today. And it's been a really fun journey. It's been really cool to be, I just celebrated a birthday and I looked around and I told my team, I said, it feels so great to look around and feel like you're doing what you love with people you really respect. And that's something that makes me very happy.
Well, and you certainly were a visionary because like you said, social media has just exploded. And, I read a couple things about you. I've, of course, learned a lot about you. One is that you couldn't find a job after college. So this was your way of getting scrappy and starting your own business. And I also read that your motivation has kind of changed. In the beginning, it was like self-serving and I'm going to get this done. And now you view it differently as serving your clients. So how's that evolved?
Yeah, when I started out, it was much more me, right? Like I couldn't get a job. So I was like, I need to create something that helps me do this. And I obviously studied social, believed in it. I actually had 18 companies reject me. And it's just for multiple reasons. One of the key bases being like, hey, we don't think social has like, we don't know what to do with this thing, right? And so remember, 07, 08 is also the Great Recession. It's a very interesting and tough time to enter the market. And so initially it was like, and I don't know if I had a chip on my shoulder or I felt like I had something to prove. I think one of the things I've always been grateful for is that I have been very like, I compete against me and how do I get better? And so, but when you're starting out, it was very different. I thought about it as like, what do I want to do? What do I want to start? What do I want to be able to build? Right. And then as that's shifted, as the years have gone past, I feel like part of this is just maturing, right? Like who you are at 22, like there's not a lot of great leaders at 22. And I can't say that I shy away from that moniker even now, but I will say, I think now my motivation is much more, what can we do for the clients we serve? And how can we, for me, I always think about, I like tell people this when you have employees and new people join that like, I work for them, right? They don't technically, yes, they're on the payroll, but really your job is to work in service of your clients and your people. And one of the things that has brought me great joy that I couldn't have told you this when I started the company, that it would bring me so much joy, is being able to support people in their livelihoods, right? Because one of the things that's very special to me and to my husband, who's also an entrepreneur, like it's a shared value for us, is that you really respect what puts food on the table. And so you respect what that is, and I think maybe it's a little old fashioned. I think it's kind of in vogue right now to punch down on work. But for me, it's always been very important. And so now I think about all building something that allows people to put food on their tables, and it pays for soccer lessons. And, so there's one element of our employees, obviously. And then there's the element of, as we help our clients add whatever millions, if not billions, depending on the scale they're at, to their revenue and their top line, that's really a great feeling too, because that means now you've enabled them to hire more people and create more opportunities. And so I really like that idea of creating opportunities. And I think that's the lens with which I view the world now and what motivates me, right? The idea of like, how do we create more opportunities for people in the world?
That's a great way to look at it. And, I've talked to people like you who landed in industries they're so passionate about. It's so exciting. And I started my career in male-dominated industries that were frankly boring, hardware and then exhaust products. And to me, it was really about the people. And like you said, I thought about that. I said, okay, I wasn't in love with the product, but the relationships and thinking about, the businesses that you're supporting. And you said food on the table, soccer lessons, and there's a ripple effect that impacts the whole world. So, I think that's really great. You're all about the marketing. And as I said, I've learned a lot about your company, so cutting edge. I mentioned beforehand, I follow you on Instagram, and you were even saying happy holidays. And then you used AI to convert that into all these different languages. So you're always on the cutting edge of marketing, which of course feeds into sales. And so my audience for this podcast is sales. And so, and I'd love to hear your advice just about, your drive, ambition, your confidence that you could share with the listeners.
Yeah. Okay. So I would say, especially if you're in sales, I think confidence is so interesting because I don't know if I've ever believed in fake it till you make it. It always seemed odd to me, right? Like you're like, it's
not authentic, maybe. Yeah.
And, when people talk about the imposter syndrome, and I think that's definitely something more women I know struggle with than men. It's rare to find men who suffer from that syndrome. But you certainly find a good amount of women who feel that. For me, I've always looked at confidence more as like, it's like a muscle, right? With every rep, you move forward a step. And I think for me, that's definitely true in marketing and sales, right? In sales, it's like your ability to take no's, your ability to handle rejection, and at the end of the day, still be resilient. That's that's what it's really about. That's what makes you confident. It's not, I think it's theory is great. Textbook is fine and you're fine and you're a little, but like you have to, it's the friction, right? Of when your ideas, when you meet the real world. And then that friction, I think, is what great things come out of. And I think we live in a society too, where we try to reduce friction so much, like it's a bad thing. But really, some of the best things happen when there is that friction, when there is. And so, yeah, I would say for confidence specifically, it is a matter of finding those opportunities where there's bound to be friction because you are pitching an idea or you're doing something and someone can say no. And, it's like I have kids now and little ones still, but I think about ways and I'm like, how am I going to help them get their first 100 no's? So they are not scared of a no. I think there's such a fear of, I don't even want to say failure, but rejection, which makes sense as human beings. We're so wired, right? To,
exactly.
And I think background helps in that I was not a popular kid in school.
Really? Interesting.
Gosh, why does that surprise you, Kay? I'm such a nerd.
You're so personable. I mean, when I watch you on Instagram, I feel like you're talking to me and you're so confident. Although I love the story about when you were speaking was it high school or college and you were so afraid, but you just kept doing it. And yeah, that's really the only way to get through it. But I can't believe that you were not popular. Although some of the most successful people in the world, including you, were not popular.
I was not popular. It was an interesting transition because I moved from India when I was 9. And so you're talking about like an immigrant family coming into the country. I think there was a lot more understanding and acceptance of that sort of diversity now than was even back in the 90s. And so, I came here and I'm like this little girl in a petticoat with an accent and, and that's like, it's so funny because I definitely forget the popular kid. I think by today's standards, people will be like, oh, you were so bullied, but I just never had that lens. I remember in one of my report cards, one of the teachers wrote and I'll never forget this. She said, the other kids are mean to Shama, but she doesn't seem to care. She just finds other things to do. And I thought, that pretty much sums it.
Well, and that is, some of that you're just born with. I mean, and I've talked to some of my guests. They say, I'm just naturally happy. I'm glass half full.
Absolutely.
Others have to work at it harder.
For sure. It's one thing I've always been grateful for is the fact that I have a lot of propensity for joy. Actually, I'd never seen this until so funny sidebar story. When I hired my chief of staff, I got him through a recruiting service. It's amazing. And the recruiting service does this test, to make sure they match you with the right person. One of the categories they test you for is propensity for joy. And they were
wow, that was a category? That's fascinating.
It is, but I guess it makes sense. It was yeah, I was like, what is this? But they said that I scored off the charts. Like it was like 99 percentile. It was just funny. So, and I think that's true. I think like your propensity for how much joy you have and that you can get out of life is important, but again, a muscle. So I do think while we are born with certain inclinations, right, of who we are, I think there's so much well, let me put it this way. I think it's a bad idea to give up your agency to say, I was just born this way, because you have so much control over who you become as an adult, and you are constantly becoming. So I will say that, I never thought that I'd be in marketing. I never thought that I would be in sales. But then when you grow up and you redefine it and you're like, this is about communicating a message to someone and connecting the dots for someone who needs something that you have to offer, then it's so different. You're like, yeah, of course. I want.
Today's podcast is sponsored by the acclaimed book, Uncopyable Sales Secrets, How to Create an Unfair Advantage and Outsell Your Competition by Kay Miller. If you want to make more sales, you need to read this book. We'll even get you started with a free download of the first 2 chapters. Go to uncopyablesales.com/chapters to grab this offer right now.
Well, you've always been really intentional though. I love the stories about you saying I was not going to take help from my parents if I couldn't buy something or if I couldn't afford something, I wouldn't buy it. So you did have these qualities that serve you, but of course you're human. You're going to have times that you're not confident or you're not sure of yourself, whatever. You're not filled with joy, and then yes, it's something you have to focus on and make it happen.
Yeah, it's funny you should say about intentionality. I would say, being raised in an immigrant household, right? I think I'm allergic to entitlement. And I like every day, when we have clients who give us their business or people who work here, I think because of my kind of allergic reaction to entitlement, I never take it for granted. I'm very grateful for the opportunities that I've been given, that the clients who work with us give us a chance to work with them and do that. And I just don't ever take that lightly. And I feel like that really has to be earned. And I think that's so true as a meta point in sales and marketing today. It has to be earned. Like
Yeah.
your trust has to be earned. That sale has to be earned. It is so much harder to buy, even to advertising, because we see that, right? Trust in advertising, it is an all-time low. So you have to earn that business.
Yeah, I heard you talk about the trust, and sometimes even an inferior product will have more trust. And so that is really the currency that people, or how they judge what they're going to buy. Interesting talking about being an immigrant. My niece is married to a young man from Venezuela, and
Mhm.
he feels so lucky and blessed. In fact, I just interviewed my niece, but he had nothing. He's just so appreciative of the opportunities. Oh my gosh, he's such a hard worker. And I'm sorry, the entitlement thing, people bash millennials. Of course, you are a millennial, but there is that attitude of entitlement. So in the business that you've created, and of course in sales too, what you get out of it is what you put into it. So you definitely can't have that attitude of entitlement.
Yeah, I think there's the idea that the world owes you something, right? I think that's the thing I've always sort of chafed against. And your niece's husband was Venezuelan. Yeah, like that's. I think you see that a lot from people who come from less, and then when you see that, you so appreciate it. And it's something, very candidly, that we struggle to think about how do we instill that in our children, because the contrast is what makes you so appreciative, right? And you work so hard so they won't have to have the same struggles as you. And at the same time, it's those struggles that really define who you are as a person and your character. So, yeah, I mean, just like I think there's interesting challenges for sure around that.
Yeah, there are. I watched an Instagram post where you surprised your kids with a train set, an amazing train set. So, yes, they're going to have everything, although they're going to have a couple of super role models. And so you're providing that example for them, that something tells me that's not going to happen with them. But yeah, we have
Thank
to.
you. One can hope, and we do our best. And I think that's really what so much of this boils down to is that, right? Okay, like whether it's sales or parenting, you just do your best. And like your best some days is going to be better than other days. I think that's something I really come to appreciate and accept too, about balancing motherhood and running a business and all this stuff. Like some days, like I'm like an amazing mom, and like someone give this girl an award because I am killing it. And then maybe that's not the day where I show up as the best leader or like the best like maybe that's just a different side of the brain. And then there's other days where I'm like, man, like I really dropped the ball here. I yelled at the kids, or I did something that I'm not so proud of. But we had a great day at work. So and then on some rare magical days, all the stars align and you knock it out of the park with everything. But I think like there's so much part of on social. And one of the things I really think is important for when you were trying to get better at sales, anything, is the importance of disconnecting just as much as it is connecting. Because part of like you saying like, hey, you're always ahead on, like, you stay ahead of the curve, you know what's going on. But right now, for example, I don't have social media on my phone. I've taken off all the, because
Really?
what I find is when I remove all of this, like I'll use it on my computer or my desktop if I need to. But what I find is when I do that, I read a lot more. So I read, 2 books this week.
Yeah, that's great.
Right.
Social media does get in the way of that stuff.
And you have to balance it out because it's important. And, for my field, obviously, we have to keep up, but you have to think about like your mental diet too. We talk so much about our physical diets and our health, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about our mental diets and what we consume. And when you just scroll through stuff, that's like, the equivalent of, binging on popcorn,
or
which,
crack.
yeah,
Not that
like-
I've ever used crack. I'm not a crack user, but no, it's addictive and they want it to be. And like you said, that is also part of what you do. You're helping create, an image and all these different components for brands through social media.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's kind of a,
I mean,
I
yeah,
don't know.
it's you have to find the balance. As I'm saying, I'm like, even me, I'm very strategic and mindful of how I'm using these platforms because it's so easy to get stuck in the scroll. And to really be able to do good quality work, sometimes you have to turn that off to be able to actually focus.
Something tells me though that you are very good at managing your time, and now you have a team, you have a machine, and you're running the machine. But in the beginning, it was just you, right? Bootstrapping it, and so how are you? Are you a good time manager?
I would say yes. My husband would say no.
He's not here.
It's not because I like we're always running late to stuff, and so it's so funny. I blame the Indian genes. I'm like, babe, I'm sorry, but yeah. So I will say I feel very lucky that I started my company when I was young as I was, without any obligations. Because what else are you going to do with that? You know what I mean? All you have is when you're younger, all you have is time. So. And I'm so grateful that I spent a lot of my 20s building this and using that time to do some of these things that are now like grown into trees and whatnot. The other side of that though now is, as a mom, I'm much more mindful of my time too. So, and more than time, I would say I think about my energy more than time. So like time is time, right? You get 24 hours. So,
Mhm.
and I don't think this gets talked about enough either. Okay. As women, our energy varies considerably. Like there are days where I have way more energy than other days, right? It's just the way, like, I like biology. I like, so for me though, time is time. Like certain things are gonna take longer or less, whatever. I prioritize based on, um, I am very intentional about how I spend time with my kids. But I think more of that is energy. Like, what do you spend time thinking about? And that's like, it goes back to like removing social feeds from your post for a while, or what are the relationships you really want to cultivate? What's important to you? So I think those things are things I think about more. And what's on my mind rather than just like what's on the clock. Because I think you can be with your kids and not be present. And I'm certainly guilty of it at times, but I try not to be. So I just try to be a lot more present in the time that I do have doing whatever I am doing.
Well, and how many times have you seen a mom with her kids? I shouldn't pick on moms or dads with their kids, and they're scrolling through their phone.
I've been one of those moms. I am one. Yeah, it's hard. Absolutely. I've totally been that mom. And my husband's so like, it's hard because, I'd say there's 2 types of times. There's times where there's things going on at work. So you're like, all right, we're going walking to the park. I'm going to look at stuff because I need to this needs to get out, right? There's a deadline. Then there's like those lull moments. And this is where I'm trying to get better at, we are such a dopamine hit culture now. Where like if the kids are going to bed, I'm like, all right, just go to bed. And it's so easy to scroll and do something else just, because it's lull time. You're like, they're just trying to get them to quiet down and go to bed or whatever. And I'm trying not to do that. And it is hard. these are not easy things. I think like that's important to acknowledge is that, yeah, these are hard things and our brains are so wired now for the quick hits, for the dopamine, like I'm fascinated to see what research we come out with in 10 years to see how it is changing our brains. And there are certain things that scare me. We'll save them for another podcast, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm scared too for this next generation. I don't know what's going to happen with our kids because I mean, our daughter, Kelly, had a cell phone at 10 because she was a golfer and she'd walk to the golf course and we wanted to know where she was. And that was when MySpace, which is I'm sure you remember that because you're young. There was MySpace and I'd be going on there checking to make sure, she wasn't putting her address in or whatever. But now I mean, and I don't know what the future holds, what you think about TikTok and like you said, Twitter's exploded, all these media. And in a way, it's great. One thing I was going to say, I'm kind of meandering here, but one thing I really admire about you is that you're so real. You're this super successful woman in business, like you said, immigrant too. But you're not afraid to show your vulnerability and be real. That is so important, I think, in sales and everything. And you have a brand. You help your companies build a brand. So I just wanted to throw that in there that I really appreciate the fact that you don't say that you're perfect.
Thank you. I don't know anybody who is. I certainly know people who project that image on social. And I just don't think it does anyone any favors. I try to be very candid when people ask me things. I'm not a morning person. People are like, oh, all these success things will tell you wake up at 5 a.m. And
I know.
I would be miserable. Like that's just not. So I think so much of this, you have to do what's right for you, right? Like you have to find the things that work for you and that make you happy. And that's the life that you get to create. And I think one of the things that I hope that this coming generation and my kids and be able to see that is that you have a lot of agency to do that. And technology gives you a lot of opportunities and a lot of options to create the life you want, as long as you can sort of keep those demons at bay and not be so sucked in, because it's very easy to get pulled into here's the right way to do things and here's the wrong way to do things. And I hope that we teach them that they can do things their own way, like even in sales. Like there's data is important, meaning maybe you have a closing style that works. That's great. Like you've got to use your strengths and what works for you.
Yeah. And I've been amazed at all the different women I talk to who are extremely successful in sales, and they're all different. The way they sell is different. And really, being authentic is huge because they can smell a rat, right? They know if you're not being intentional.
We're so much more discerning as an audience and so much less gullible than we were, right? Like generations ago, like you put a label on people, but and it's just not the case today. I mean, look at the de-influencing trend, which runs on social with people think the opposite of influencing. It's like, here's why this is bad. It's literally called de-influencing people about something. So yeah, I think in general, we are a lot more skeptical. I mean, that's what we see with our clients and their customers and prospects across the board. They are way more skeptical of stuff than they ever were. Which means that's where marketing comes to play too. And you have to spend so much more time, I think, before you ever get on the phone with them to build that trust. And the faster you build trust, the easier it is to close, right? You're going to close faster because people feel like they know you. A lot of what I put out there when people come to us and Zen, because of so much info that we put out there, they're coming to us more like, hey, how can you help us? Not, who are you? What can you do? Can you help us? We rarely get those questions. It's much more often, we've seen your stuff. We like your approach. Here's what we're dealing with. How does this work? And that's really the ideal situation in sales is you want that. You want people to be able to come to you and say, how can you help me? Right? That's the difference with people say like, versus who are you and why are we talking?
Right. And as you pointed out, you don't buy anything anymore without going online. But yeah, you're building that presence for companies that, allows the salespeople to have that advantage. And marketing, of course, I don't know, it leads to the sales. And of course, sales is what makes a business go. But yeah, that marketing piece obviously is just essential, and it builds that relationship with the customer right first. So, Shama, do you have any closing thoughts? Because we're almost out of time. We've already given some really valuable stuff. Do you have anything to close with?
Well, recap and just say be really mindful of what you consume. Like if you're listening to this podcast, good for you. Like you're consuming something hopefully that helps you in life and business, and be careful who you take advice from. Everyone's got a platform, doesn't mean they should. So yeah, they would say find what works for you in sales. It's important. Everyone's going to have their own methodology, and resilience, like build that muscle, which means get your 100 no's, get your 1,000 no's, because you don't need that many yeses. You just need the right yeses.
I love that. You don't need, you just need the right yeses. You can't sell to everyone. You shouldn't sell to everyone. Really great advice. I want to encourage people to go to your website, shamahyder.com. I'll put the links in the show notes because you have some really awesome giveaways. One I noticed is the 5-day MBA on modern day PR and earned media. And so that's just one of the things that you can take advantage of and learn from Shama. So Shama, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I've really enjoyed it.
My pleasure, Kay.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Uncopyable Women in Sales, your source for secrets you can use to make more sales. Check the show notes for links and contact information. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please spread the word by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review. You can always learn more by going to uncopyablesales.com/podcast. Until next time, go out and supercharge your sales like a true uncopyable rock star.